Okay, I wanted to make this video to explain the changes that I sent out over the weekend. Originally, I had intended on going through this material in class, but I decided to do this video for two reasons. First of all, I would rather not take up class time going into a really long explanation. And secondly, I'd like you to listen to this and think about this. And then if you have further questions or whatever, we can discuss it during class, okay? Maybe around the break or whatever, we can talk about some of the issues then. I think mostly I wanted you to understand why I made the changes and what they're supposed to do, okay? I received an email today from someone in class, and, I can see your point of view and how you're thinking. And I want to say three things, okay? First, I want to start off by saying that it was my original intention not to make any changes at all. I know that seems kind of hard to believe because I made a decent number of changes, but it really was. I know that I'm a new variable coming in. People already have a lot of anxiety about what's going on in the course. And it would be nice to be able to hold on to those things and at least have those things constant, okay? So it would have been nice if we could have kept things the way they were. I debated about it a great deal. Okay, I thought about this for well over a week, and I've been talking to Janet, and we've been throwing ideas around, and I've really given it a lot of thought. First, it was my intention not to make any changes. I wouldn't make these changes unless I really felt they were necessary. The second thing I want to say is that, and I think it's important you understand this, is that any instructor worth their salt, they understand that they have a responsibility to the students because they affect the students' grades. And that's a very serious responsibility. Grades are important. I don't care what anyone says. And, to have an effect on a person's grade is really to affect their future livelihood. I take that very seriously. I can tell you from my own experience, when I was an undergraduate, I had 2 C's. One I deserved, but one I didn't. I had a laboratory course that was worth at least 4 credits. It might have been more than that. And the instructor had a verbal agreement that they were going to give me an extension. And when I turned in the work within the deadline for the extension, they only gave me partial credit. And it had a really serious effect on me. I didn't graduate with honors. It affected when I applied for graduate schools and things like that. So I take that very seriously. Okay? So the point is that I'm not going to make any changes that have the potential to do any harm. All of these changes are what I would call conservative changes. Okay? They're changes that are going to make things easier for you. Let me give you an example. Participation. Participation is 12% of your total grade. 6% is showing up for every class meeting, and the ones that you don't show up, I prorate that 6%. But you get 6% just for attendance. That's better than Janet's 5%. The other 6% is for participation in class. In other words, that I see you're working, you're trying, you're putting things into Excel. When I ask questions, you're thinking, okay? I'm not going to be really strict about this, but it's extremely important that when you're in class, you're in class. Okay, your mind is not some other place. This is really the one time that you have the best chance of understanding the material. So I think it's important that I weight part of your grade on in-class effort. Okay, and really, but everyone's been doing that. Okay, I don't think that that's asking anything more from you than you guys already do. So you went from having 5% for participation all the way to 12%. That's a conservative change. Okay? When it comes to homework, for example, the homework's going to take you less time. That's a conservative change. I'm going to give you less problems. I'm going to give you more support in the way of written solutions and video solutions, and I'm going to give you a chance to make up those points. So again, that's what I would call a conservative change. The third thing that I want you to know that's very important is that, it isn't just about giving you a good grade. Okay, the third thing that's important is that you leave with something. That you actually leave with an understanding of what's going on. Otherwise, this is just a game, okay? Tell me what I need to know and I'll do it and I'll get a certain grade. And that's not what an education's about. And it's not what I want you to get. I think you paid for an education. You should get more than just a check mark saying you took the course. You should leave with something. And I can tell you in your field, leaving with an understanding of how to treat data, how to analyze it, how to look at it, how to think about it, that's a very valuable skill. Okay, you may not be using it right now, but you're not going to be in the same position that you are forever. You're going to move up. And when you get to higher ranks in management and things of this sort, administrative positions, these things really do come into play. And in fact, a lot of people's jobs depend upon their ability to understand what's going on with the company in terms of data and being able to make the appropriate changes. Okay? So the quizzes and the projects are designed for that reason. The quizzes are designed to test your understanding. Okay, I think it's important. I think it's important that there's something between the homework and the exam. There's some sort of buffer where we can double check your understanding before you get to the exam, where it counts a lot if you make a mistake. Okay, I think that's very important. The project is very important, and this is something that Janet and I discussed. She very much wanted to do, but I don't think she was sure how to actually do it at the time. Most people in the class have positions in finance, in business. You have pretty well defined goals. I think a project is very appropriate and it would be good for you to do. Okay. If people don't want to do the project, that's fine. I can make up a final exam. But again, this is a conservative thing. I think a project's a lot easier than a final exam. The material that you're learning now is the tip of the iceberg. You haven't seen the bottom of the iceberg. Okay, it gets harder. There's a lot more to this class than the little bit that you've seen on top so far. And honestly, my honest opinion is you don't want to be studying for a final. Plus, you do the project, you learn how to actually use the stuff. It makes sense. I can't speak for other people, but I know for myself that I don't really understand something until I own it. Until I get in and I work with it and I understand it in my own way. And there's nothing like experience that will help you in that regard. Okay, so I think the project's important, but if people are opposed to it or don't want to do it, they don't have to. I'm not going to worry about the project right now. After we do the midterm, which is a couple weeks away, we will get into the project. I'll begin talking about it. But it's not going to be, again, it's not going to be onerous and a huge burden. It's going to be something I think you're going to enjoy. It's going to be manageable. I know you have other things going on at the end of the semester. I mean, so do I. I don't want to make this a long, drawn-out thing. But I do want to give you more than just a grade, and I think the project gives you valuable experience. Okay. One last issue, my stat lab. Okay. For the most part, we're going to abandon my stat lab. And let me explain why, because this actually is a major departure. My stat lab is meant mostly for the instructor. It's really not meant for the student. I actually did some research. People who have studied my stat lab, my math lab, these sorts of programs, what they find out is that the students don't do much better than a conventional paper homework class. And in fact, they actually take a little bit longer to get the homework done. So there's no proven benefit to the student. I can tell you 2 cases where my stat lab would be useful. If you had an instructor who had never taught the class before, and so they didn't really feel comfortable or confident making up homework sets from scratch, quizzes from scratch, exams from scratch, my stat lab would be good. It would be a crutch for them. If you had a very large class, if you were an instructor and you had a class of over 50 students, you didn't have a grader, you were teaching 3 or more classes, my stat lab would come in handy. But we don't have either of these situations. I've taught this class before. I can make exams and homeworks and quizzes. We only have 7 people. Okay, my stat lab is really not a good option for us. Moreover, it's not a good option for us because a lot of the problems are going to involve stuff that we don't need. Okay, I just listened to the consensus report of a committee at the American Statistical Association. Okay, so these are experts on statistical education. And the recommendations were to cut down pen and pencil calculations, theory, tables, and formulas. And guess what a lot of my stat lab is? It's all four of those things. Okay? So this isn't my prejudice. This isn't me coming in and say this is my way and this is the way I want to do it. This is what statistical educators agree is really the best way to teach introductory statistics. Okay, whether it's business statistics or whatever. So the problem is that we're not going to do some of the stuff the book does. Actually, a fair amount of the stuff the book does. And what that means is it's going to be really hard to use my stat lab, because my stat lab is based a lot on tables, it's based on formulas and stuff like that, and we're not going to do that in this class. So it's very hard to use. But I think also it's very counterproductive. I mean, everything that I read in the literature, the anecdotal reports that I hear from everyone in this class, what Janet has told me, what I know from myself, I taught using my math lab for calculus. It's the same sort of thing. It basically turns out that students spend too long and there's not enough good feedback to really answer their questions and help them. Okay? And so again, this is not my bias or my prejudice. This is stuff that's in the literature that people have studied. My stat lab is really not optimal for the students. And since from an instructor's point of view, I don't need it, I really can't see using it. Okay? I think that's pretty much everything. As far as the schedule, I cut down a few topics. I added multiple linear regression. Again, that's based off a recommendation from the American Statistical Association that you should see multivariate problems with more than one variable. And I totally agree. Based on my experience, it's important to recognize that complicated problems don't just depend on one thing. They depend on a lot of things. And so we're going to study that last. I'm going to stand by the schedule, but if anyone has any questions or any concerns, I'm willing to alter it and modify it somewhat. We can certainly discuss it. I'd be more than happy to explain the rationale. But I hope that gives you a little bit of insight into what I'm doing and why. So, I'd like you to think about this, and, if you have any questions or comments, please let me know in class on Wednesday. We can discuss it more. But again, I think the changes are conservative. They're not going to require more work for you, actually less. They're going to be more effective. They're going to make better use of your time, and you're going to learn better because you're not learning a lot of stuff that you don't have to know. And third, they're going to give you something more than just a grade. They're going to give you experience, and you're going to actually know something other than formulas that you'll just forget when you leave the grade. So based on those three reasons, that was my rationale for making these changes. And like I said, I've given this a lot of thought. It's not something I wanted to do. I hate change. Okay, I wished everything could stay the same like it was back in, 1970s or 1980s. Okay, that'd be great. Might be boring, but it's just not realistic. Okay, things change, and sometimes change is necessary. And I think everyone who's done the MyStat Lab recognizes that there really is a need for a change. I don't think that's a really effective tool for you guys. And so I'm trying to do something better. I know the homework's going to be a little new, but that's okay. We'll work through it. I'll explain it in class. Once you see it, it'll make perfect sense. And I think it's going to be a lot less complicated than my stat lab. You're not going to have to worry when what is due. The schedule's totally written out. The homework will be done every single week on clockwork at the same time in the same way. So I think there's a lot less moving parts, and it'll make the administrative part for you a lot easier too. Okay, thanks for listening, and I appreciate your input. Look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thanks.